online, and I would like to say that we have been speaking about this topic for the fourth time. This is Information Operation Christmas. And would like to say that I'm Ellina Shnurko-Tabakova. I'm the head of the Council of Info Security and Cyber Security. We would like to thank Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Our cooperation this year brought this format that we are having now. We thank High Tech TV and also Tax Index for these gifts. These are the books. Tota Calvaria Publishing House was present to us, and we have also one book of our partner concerning these reflections, and we are going to speak about these topics, and it will be interesting to read these books. And there is a book about ancient Rome, and we may find difference in the situation that we face now and compare it with the previous situations. So we have already had such events concerning information operations at Christmas. Last year we had more than 20 speakers who brought conclusions of the last year and provided forecasts. Let's be open. We understand that escalation and of aggression of the Russian Federation that happened in spring this year. This was an important topic. That's why we focused on this topic. We would like to study this topic from different sides. We would like to show what is ongoing in the media and what hybrid war means, what it consists of. And it's not a coincidence that we have participants, speakers from academia who have been working in this area of information and hybrid threats, and there are speakers who are practitioners, and for nearly 8 years they are working at information frontline. They are working on counteracting means. Also we have representatives of the military, and I really hope that after this event we will have one more step. We will have proper methodology for those who counteracts this threat, for scientists, military men, and people from NGOs and experts, in order that our front would be more competent and we should be really efficient, because often this is lacking. Gladly, I would like to give the floor to Oleksandra Tsekhanovska, our first speaker. She represents the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and she's going to tell us about the activity, and she's going to tell us about these things in more detail. Thank you very much, Ellina. Thank you very much to our audience, those who watch us here and online, and those guests who joined us during this Christmas event. And we are going to speak about serious things, and we are trying to do this in such a way in order not to lose our humor, because humor, as practice shows, is one of the best instruments to protect ourselves and our community from panic and chaos that Kremlin and the Russian disinformation are trying to impose on Ukrainian society and to our Western partners. As Ellina said, I am Oleksandra Tsekhanovska, and I'm the head of hybrid warfare analytical group of UCMC. We are dealing with constant monitoring of information threats that are ongoing from the Russian side, and I love and hate this topic at the same time, and we should focus on something now. And today I would like to speak about what and how Kremlin said about armored forces of Ukraine, what were the main Kremlin narratives, and also about the surges in disinformation and what it means for us. The first thing we should mention Speaking diplomatically, if we remember George Orwell, this is double-think of Russian propaganda. If we name things by their own name, their propaganda looks like schizophrenia. In 2021, Russian propaganda was focused, while speaking about armed forces of Ukraine, on two main narratives, as they did during many years from the start of the war. And these narratives, at first glance, they look contradictory. The first one is discrediting about Ukrainian army that it is weak, non-disciplined, and unable to fight. And we understand that this is not true, and this is the key trend of the Russian disinformation when they speak about our armed forces. And the second narrative is that Ukraine is actively preparing for advance, and this rhetoric started to increase during the last several weeks. And they say that we have all the resources for this. So information space is spammed by contradictory messages, and for Russian disinformation, this is typical. We have a lot of examples of this. For example, MH17, when Russians, in different ways, they blamed Ukraine for all of this. And there were many versions concerning these events, and we understand why it is happening, and we understand why it continues to happen. So one of the strategic aims of disinformation is to provoke in the audience chaos and distrust. I continuously speak about it, that they present the world when the audience believe that everyone is lying and they should not trust anyone. And this is a big threat to our security, because in this world, all Russian propaganda, all notorious fakes, Russia One, First Channel, Russia Today, they are at one level with professional independent media with high standards of journalism. If we are going into detail about what is going on in the frame of these narratives and beyond, discreditation attempts were made, and they are known to us. There are several areas, and on the slide you may see it. I will voice this information. The main attacks in order to represent Ukrainian army as weak, non-disciplined, and with lack of military capability. They say that people constantly leave, massively leave, and also problems with alcohol and problems with corruption. And I stressed it on the slide. You see the same messages that we've seen this year. They were voiced in 2016, in 2015, in 2014. So this is a common trend. And also there is a common approach when these Kremlin arguments, they are brought to the Ukrainian media by the agents of influence. You may see this Anatoly Shari here is mentioned. He promotes also these messages. Also for discreditation of the armed forces of Ukraine this year, the Kremlin is using the messages, traditional mantra that the armed forces allegedly shell non-military objects and kill peaceful residents. I monitor many Russian TV channels, Telegram channels, and we may find information there that this is a quote. They say that they allegedly, the fascist junta, they shelled the peaceful population of Donbass once again, and this is a common rhetoric for them. And two more channels, they are more new to these messages, that Ukraine is allegedly spends too much for the army, but it faces a lot of other problems. And this is an interesting argument because it shows that Kremlin, no matter what it says, no matter how they are trying to discredit our army, in fact, they understand that they represent a big threat, and in this way they are trying to undermine the support inside Ukrainian society to the armed forces, and they also speak traditionally about social, economic, and political processes. Here we see that the armed forces of Ukraine allegedly suffer from pandemic of coronavirus, and it's significantly undermined their military capabilities. And heroic people are serving in the Ukrainian army, but they are the same as we are. They may fall ill. We understand that there are COVID incidents in the army, but this doesn't mean that the armed forces of Ukraine, somehow due to a pandemic, just stopped and wait when the Kremlin will make the operation. So despite this, the Kremlin is trying to convince their target audience in the opposite. Also, a lot of efforts are made to create some fakes concerning Donbass for Donbass population and for the Western audiences. And the search was after the successful use of Bayrak drone use that provoked a wave of disinformation. It was interesting and contradictory. The first thing that draws attention is that from the very start they tried to say that there was no launch. And the Russian hackers even broke Ukrainian news site and spread this unfair information about this launch, that it didn't happen. And then they started to spread this information through channels that are supported by Kremlin and the spam sites. And then it became evident that they cannot say that it didn't happen. They changed their tactics and they started to say that the use happened, but it was absolutely not agreed with the top officials, that this was a voluntary act, and this message was directed to the West in order to show that Ukraine should not be supplied with the weapons, because here the situation is not stable and there is no proper coordination, and we know that this is not true. And also the key narrative that Ukraine is an aggressor state. Once again, we see this message now. It became more active after Baraktar use, and now this discrediting rhetoric that I mentioned before. In the media, we do not see developments concerning this now. About current situation at the end of my presentation, I would like to say about this, and then I will give floor to my colleagues that will go into more detail. Now we see anti-Ukrainian and anti-Western information attack concerning escalation and possibility of military intervention by Russia. And maybe you heard about this fake spread by the Minister of Russian Federation. So we may call him the Minister of Attack, Mr. Shoigu, that allegedly USA prepared some chemical attack. And this was provided in the Russian media, and it was supported by the media in the occupied territory, local occupation authority, and they started to develop this message, and they say that these chemical components will paralyze people. And now in the occupied territories, they check water that is brought to the occupied territory from the territory that is controlled by Ukrainian power. Why it happens so? Because in such a way, by spreading such disinformation, the Kremlin insists that Ukrainian power allegedly wants to carry out this provocation in order to force the West to pay more attention to Ukraine and to military aggression of Russia, to bring more attention to this, that this tragedy won't be ignored by the West, and Ukraine is portrayed as a cynical aggressor state that is capable to do anything. And at the same time, we see meta-narrative concerning foreign rule, and it was invented in Kremlin long time before. You heard it in the Medvedchuk channel, and before they started to spread it, you may watch the news and compare the dates, and Putin started to use this term in relation to Ukraine earlier. Vyacheslav Nikonov, Russian deputy and the head of Ruski Mir fund, had started to use this term even earlier, and then this term was imported by the local agents of influence in our media, and experts believe that this is the most efficient narrative of Russian disinformation that is spread in Ukrainian media. In this case, it looks like this. They say that NATO wants to motivate Ukraine to carry out this provocation concerning military aggression, and once again Ukraine is portrayed not as an independent state but as a puppet in the hands of the Western forces. And also they have contradictory message that the West will leave Ukraine behind and Ukraine won't be able to cope with the military threat that is waiting for it. And there was a small operation. Russian propaganda media published a lot of materials about the topic that Biden left Afghanistan and he will leave Ukraine the same. Several days after this, on Facebook, there was bot attack and troll attack that started to spread the same messages.
And here, at this very stage, we find ourselves today. These days, the main Russian media have been saying the following messages and statements about Ukraine. So what is the main message? The main line of disinformation is as follows. Ukraine is actively preparing itself for the attack on Russia. And we believe that this is the proof of one more important thing, that they perceive Ukraine as a serious they want to show that Ukraine is a serious rival, and we should do everything possible from us to make this idea true, to become a strong rival. All that disinformation is not possible without a secret Santa. We also have our own secret Santa, and the special forces, special operation forces are truly Ukrainian, and today we have the commander-in-chief of the special operations forces in Ukraine and how they work to ruin the Russian propaganda. Good afternoon, dear audience of the UCMC and the online audience. I would not say much, perhaps, but I want to emphasize that the Russian propaganda machine is powerful, partially because it is very well structured. So the disinformation grows, comes from the very top, then it goes to such pushers and drivers as Zakharov and Peskov, then it is disseminated to the information agencies, and thus it reaches the massive audience. What we have been observing also that they have three directions of information campaigns. One is targeting the collective West, the Western Europe, etc. Then another direction is targeting Russian population, the population of the Russian Federation, and a separate direction of disinformation is targeting Ukrainian audience and other post-Soviet countries. Can you upload my slides? Please just wait a moment. What was the name of your presentation? The Russian disinformation machine. We haven't got your. We'll find it. Please wait for a moment. We will find it, I am sure. We have found it. Russian disinformation, the machine of Russian disinformation as a tool. As for the as for such component of disinformation as Russian military forces, they are important component of all this disinformation machine. That is, the information agencies and they have the 12th department of the general staff, and it is responsible for the disinformation operations in the former Soviet Union countries. Also, there are special services under the auspice of this department located in Moscow, Sevastopol, Khabarovsk, and in the south, and also 12 companies of the special operations, and inside those special operations forces, they have the foreign special operations units, and they have their own disinformation subunits. By the way, I have to say that Russian disinformation machine is not as efficient as we believe it to be. Quite often they are unable to trace back and to hold interferences in very important sectors, and nevertheless, they try to blame us, and they are afraid of our achievements even in the areas where we do not act. Then they quite often work with military experts, or as English language teachers, or and this makes the efficiency of their work much lower. Also, the flow of Russian propaganda has gained a reputation of a terrible liar, and less and less people all over the world continue to trust it. Inside the Russian Federation, they have a lot of issues with economy, religious, freedom of speech. In Kazan recently, the rector of local university was arrested because of a attempted murder, and quite recently the member of parliament also made an attempt to murder somebody, and there's this distracted Russian mass media from Ukraine. So failures and mistakes the source of the failures is in the patterns which they quite often use. This allows our officers, like for example border guards, to make assumptions about possible provocations and take preventive measures. For example, the actions at the border or possible provocations at the border during the recent crisis at the Polish-Belarus border, where the migrants were used. And another example, when the Russian journalists making reports from the Belarus border wrongly mentioned Ukrainian city of Priluki, which sounds similar to the Belarus village at the border, and tried to pretend that the shooting of people happened inside Ukraine, which was nonsense, of course. So that's it, and thank you very much. I believe this is a unique opportunity for you to ask a direct question to an expert from the Special Operations Forces. I expected that the speakers would ask questions to one another, but I don't see this. White and black hackers, the propagandists, and all sorts of experts, they are available experts among the Special Operations Forces. But my question to you, whether you have sufficient number of the experts that you need, and perhaps the civil society may provide any assistance to you. Thank you. I would like to use this opportunity to thank once again to many volunteers, to those who provide voluntary assistance to us. But of course, we have been fighting against this propaganda for the hybrid aggression for almost 8 years now, and of course during that period of times we built up a sufficient number of expertise, including multifaceted experts in all the areas. Thank you for your willingness to help. We are ready to provide trainings to a big number of journalists to counteract to Russian propaganda. Do you have any information about feedback which is provided to the Russian commander-in-chief about those weaknesses in Russian propaganda that you mentioned in your presentation? I believe that since you understand about that loopholes, they are aware of them too.
Thank you for your question. What we see is the lack of coordination between the bodies that get information concerning cyber attacks, and proper coverage of this information concerning psychological operations. So they have the system, but as any big system, it is not quick to respond. So if we reckon these fakes, they may use the scenario that was thought through before, and they may provide some feedback on our response, and this may bring different results that were envisaged. So the media sector cannot catch up. They just believe in themselves and they do not see obstacles. Do we have other questions now? So I believe that we will have more cooperation in the future, and we wish all of us to have the victory. And I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, and I would like to say that this is a person due to whom, in my presentation, we have such a component that is called the decomposition of the threats and its semantic core. So this is how I formed, and we started to use such words that may confuse some people. So how we should understand the threats, what they are, and how to counteract them. Oleksandr Korystin, Doctor of Legal Sciences, professor at State Scientific and Research Institute of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. Thank you very much. I would like to stress the importance of this meeting and this discussion. And to sum up the importance, I would like to do it later on after I provide my material. The Ministry of Internal Affairs pays a lot of attention to hybrid threats, and you may see it later when I come to some conclusions that I will propose to you, including about surveys concerning these problems. A working group at the ministry was created with the representatives of all executive bodies of power, and they are also the National Police and Border Guard Service, Migration Service, Emergency Service, service centers. So all those forces were included because specificity is really diverse. The terms of reference were formed, and I will tell you about it later. The surveys 4001, and the survey was structured in such a way: the assessment of threats, opportunities, internal and external factors, and we carried out SWOT analysis, and we even went further. Also, I would like to note the importance of the analysis, not of statistics, not of state statistics, that does not reflect the processes that are ongoing in society, including law enforcement activities. We carried out a survey, and we spent a lot of efforts to find reliable information in the massive of information that we got. We have a clear methodology. We worked closely with those sociologists, and we have good results. I would like to say that out of 4,001 questionnaires concerning hybrid threats, more than 12% is the number that we used in further analysis, but we are sure that this is reliable data, and conclusions we've made are representative. This is important. The example that we use representative data, reliable data, you see without filters, the diversity is not big. Second line appears one more. We use one filter, then we use two filters, and reliability of our research increased, representatives of conclusions. So we should provide all this adequately with high level of probability. So vertically in this matrix, you see the possibility of this threat, and we have 4 key groups. The first one is the biggest hybrid threats. We are speaking here only about hybrid threats. We have 19 of them. Yellow, these are the threats that are significant. 64 of them we identified. They need proper attention of top officials. The third group and the fourth group, one is 131 threats were identified by our working group, and we had a general who participated in the work, and we surveyed people for 3 or 4 hours, and we tried to find all necessary indicators to assess this work. And we based our work on risk management, and we implemented the methodology of risk management in this area. Speaking about threats, and we're speaking about security sector, and we should use such words as threats, dangers, and vulnerabilities, and other terms related to the sector. And we had a scale from 0 to 100, and we assessed all these threats, and we compared them using matrix, and the risk of threat is 50% and more. These are the biggest hybrid threats. So this is red, and orange is the 30 to 40, yellow so this is about the levels of threat and their spread and their importance. Also about the use of risk-oriented approach concerning these threats. We assess it quantitatively, taking into account the consequences of the threat. And I will go back to the matrix. In the red sector, at the level of mid-threats, these are threats connected with subversive attacks on nuclear energy objects. So this probability cannot be maximum, but the results of this threat, this is catastrophic consequences. So that's why this is in the category of most important. So there may be a high probability, but the consequences will be not so significant. So this integrative approach provides us with opportunity to have more clear approach to this threats. So we were satisfied with these results. So this picture concerning hybrid threats may be represented in this graph. This is the rating taking into account expert opinions of the bodies of the central executive power I mentioned. Opinion of experts differ. First of all, I would like to say, please pay attention to the trend. It is the same. The overall trend is the same. So this versatility of data, and we use reliable data for our analysis. This is only the beginning of the analysis. Now about hybrid threats analysis, and we now speak about only these indicators, and we have 6 main groups. So these groups are really interesting. It's not only information attacks and cyber attacks. We do not speak a lot about hybrid threats connected with criminality or connected with some provocations of the concerning the public, and also the matters concerning critical infrastructure, and also hybrid threats connected with corruption and the use of narratives, discreditation of law enforcement bodies, and we have a separate group for this. So this is not only expert assessment, we also used factor analysis. So we tried to analyze hybrid threats in different regions, and we got an interesting picture. If we have six groups that we identified, each region has its own specificity of spread of these hybrid threats. On the slide, there are main three hybrid threats.
These are three main regional threats in the regional split, so to say, and they are rather diverse, as you can see. Now, I would like to look at a group of threats which is related to the increase of criminal environment or increase of criminal crimes. The increase in crimes is a specificity of hybrid threats, and when we look at the range of them, we see that some of them are of top priority. Illegal military band formations and the illegal circulation of firearms are the major crimes which are being escalated with the specific purposes. For example, illegal circulation of firearms. Having mapped this threat, we clearly and immediately see what should be the main emphasis for counteraction of the military forces of Ukraine. Kyiv and Kyiv region, that's quite understandable. But why Rivne region and in Mykolaiv region, and this similar map became clear for me when in Lutsk there was the terrorist attack on a bus, and the terrorists had hijacked the bus. And having heard about that, I recollected this map and understood why that happened in the Volyn region. In Kyiv today, we observe the drop in bringing to responsibility for illegal circulation of firearms, and there's insufficient attention to this problem. With the growth of the problem means that this is a considerable threat. So risk management approach allows us to weight the capacities and vulnerabilities. Some time ago, the Secretary General of NATO mentioned that it is unimportant how you assess the strength of an attack of potential attack on Ukraine. The biggest issue is how you are able to counteract to these hybrid threats. This is the issue and the problem. So the scale of the threat is unimportant if you can counteract to it. So our major strive today is to become sufficiently strong to repel these attacks. I also would like to point out to only one legislative act in this area, the National Security Strategy of Ukraine, that Ukraine has to introduce the national resilience system to ensure a high level of preparedness in society and of the state to respond to the wide spectrum of threats. So, when I saw that language in the law, I felt myself very happy that eventually we have brought this proper wording about building up national resilience system. So all that analysis of risks, which included the matrix analysis, the indicators analysis, etc., has brought us to the next stage. If we think about such a hybrid threat about illegal circulation of firearms and extrapolated on 150 indicators of capacity, you find out that only half of that indicators correlate with this threat perfectly. So the model and the forecast or the simulation. And we found out what are the sources of illegal trafficking in arms, insufficient level of management in the law enforcement vertical, whether we can strengthen the professional level of law enforcers. This second indicator, the possibility to use Ukrainian framework for increasing the criminal environment. Can we improve this? Yes. And this shows that we can reach better results with tackling the most important weaknesses. And here you see the three major weaknesses. Acting against these weaknesses, we can drastically improve the situation with such hybrid threat as illegal circulation of firearms. This is a slide about risk management development. Our methodology of risk assessment and then risk management is in full trend with the international methodologies. So you see that management decisions which are based at weighting risks, threats, and abilities nevertheless require the involvement of the results of previous analysis. And unfortunately, in Ukraine, we do not have such a historic or analytical products or history of analytical products. And when on TV we watch the risk assessment exercises, nevertheless, watching that, I clearly see that the level of expertise is insufficient. Why? I believe that my material will be useful for you. Thank you. Perhaps not all the journalists are familiar with the correlations, but today we will discuss this more and you have to understand this. How do you assess the capacity of Ukraine to counteract to hybrid threats? When I faced this methodology for the first time, I gradually became the follower of the following approach. Any analysis should be based on the scientific and professional measuring and analysis. And as of now, my answer to you might sound just a bad weighted, bad developed. For example, corruption. I had analyzed the risk of corruption, and I will report this to the main court authorities in Ukraine, to the main judges, and prove that how dangerous it is, how dangerous is this risk. When you looked at the diagrams which characterize the capacities to respond to different hybrid threats, you perhaps noticed that all the response systems that are below 50% capacity, this means vulnerability in response, and everything that is up 50%, but all the list is not enough. And one of the highest threats, over 62%, is bureaucracy. This is what undermines our capacity to counteract to threats. The more, the better you formulate what you wish to analyze, the better result you would get. I mentioned 152 indicators of vulnerability and capacity to respond to the vulnerabilities, but this is a huge set of indicators. And we measured a lot of governmental bodies, and in different government bodies we got different sets of data, and the more data you have in each set of indicators, the better result you get. Now I would like to give the floor to Larysa Kompantseva, doctor in philology and from the National Academy of the Security Service of Ukraine. And you have carried out a lot of professional work, and we would like to thank you for it and to ask how the civil society and volunteers might join you in your efforts. This is about Christmas in Stratcom from single heroes to the whole team. Some years ago, we and our academy became very cheerful when we saw the document about strategic communications for the security institutions in Ukraine, and the NATO documents were accepted as the basis for them. So we developed training course in our academy, and we invited people with good experience in trainings in journalism, the anti-terrorist operation veterans. And here on this slide you see the trainees of our first course, strategic communication courses. These are people who remain in today's communication space quite actively today. Today we have more than 700 audience, and out of that audience we involve almost 52 people to our teaching. And in all the strategic communication sphere, we select one of the aspects and then invite a lot of people as trainees and the best expert in the area. We cover mostly law enforcement agencies, and together with the NATO Documentation Center in Ukraine, we organized these courses in strategic communications. We undertook this to promote some important new ideas and approaches. These are some of the institutions with whom we cooperate, and some of our publications. This list is not exhaustive, but nevertheless it shows what we are doing. First of all, I would like to mention the basic dictionary of strategic communications based on the basic NATO documents. Currently, we are working with a new version of this dictionary together with the Riga Center, and the security institutions and the civil servants can make a good use of that dictionary. Our second publication in Stratcom is about experience of the hybrid war. This was the result of those trainings which our trainers delivered. And in each section there is a list of recommendations about communication, how to build up communication, what to say, what not to say, what words are recommended for extensive use, etc. I'm thankful to Ellina and to the IT index for their support and publications. As for the forecast, at the beginning of this year, I analyzed how the doctrine I analyzed in Ateka Index how the expression Ruski Donbass is being perceived, and I found out that it was preparation to an aggression, and I was able to predict today's situation with the threats. And this proves that this could be used, well used, as an instrument for forecasting. This is our training platform and our research and training hub. Our hub brings together the researchers from security institutions, experts, civil society, volunteers, all those who are Ukrainian patriots and who are ready to work together for the victory of Ukraine. I also would like to thank Ellina, who is this is my Christmas tree with wishes, and it is decorated with my best wishes. In the National Security Academy, we have created the 3 units in strategic communications devoted to different aspects of this notion. First of all, I would like to have to see better coordination in this area, then to coordinated practices of all the state institutions in the area of Stratcom, and the close orientation on practical everyday issues. We have to develop systemic and comprehensive projects and also good leadership. These are my best wishes on this new year tree for the future year to come.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to hear such wonderful words, and it's great when we hear them. And I really liked the course. When I visited, I asked about some people who entered my name into KGB lists, and there were no such people at the time. So there should be proper cooperation with experts, with the specialists, in order to achieve good results, because the threat mentioned by the previous speaker, this bureaucratization exists in all the agencies, and I would like to give the floor to Dmytro Lande, doctor in technical sciences, professor, and head of the chair of information security at Igor Sikorsky Polytechnic University. And we're going to speak about different aspects of this problem, and about figures, about culture, about not only experts but also about the public. This provides competence, critical thinking. A lot of people are speaking about it, but we cannot do it without proper figures. Good afternoon. I greet everyone with the upcoming holidays. I wish everyone health and peace. I'm going to tell you about connections between different events. I won't go into detail about events, but about the mechanism of research. Why? Because we have some information that is in the network, in this information space, in common understanding, and we now are able to collect this information. Experts have this information, they may aggregate this information, for example, aggregate it in time. Then we need to come to some conclusions. We may search for information. When we find some flows of information concerning some topic we are interested in, we may carry out some work concerning comparison, and comparison is one of the main assets of our scientific work. We may compare different processes among themselves and to say whether they are close to each other. Now I would like to show you the slide. We have two processes. One process is shelling in 2014-2015, when we were shelled. And the second graph are humanitarian convoys. And we would like to understand how they are interrelated. Yes, they are interrelated. And there is a formula that shows how one process depends on the other with the use of shift. And you may see it at a lower graph. First there were some convoys, and then there were shellings. And we see that there is something about 1 week. Smoothing of 1 week. This is with the use of info stream that collected the information from the channels from the side. We started to study different types of weapons, and we found out that cartridges are used first, and about shellings by missiles. This happens in a week or more. We could see the plans, and we could provide this information to those who need it in order to understand how to prepare to these events. So this is comparison of two processes. This is the first type of comparison process. Also, we may compare the process within itself. One process may repeat itself in time. One process depends on its history. If it is not dependent, we could not forecast anything. So this is the forecast concerning an overall topic, a broad topic, such as terrorism. And we see a line of autocorrelation, self-correlation. And we took information also about cybersecurity as an element of a hybrid war. And we see here the spikes, and we see big diversity in this autocorrelation curve. Why it is so? It happens that the spikes, the peaks, they repeat. If we study cyber attack, we may see that there are some info operation and intelligence, then attack, then some time passes, and then there is investigation and publication of information about investigation. And this process is versatile, and then the cyber attack may be mentioned and used for the studying of future attacks. This includes the components that we've studied before the war. One more type of comparison of information process or dynamics of the process. We may use a template with which we may compare it. For example, a simple wave. For mathematicians, this is well known. Next is Mexican hat. These are simple information attacks. And the third, wavelet-Marley. All of them, they are within the theory, wavelet theory. First component means wave, and the second component of this word is means small wave in French. So these are the real processes that correspond our information security and the security in the framework within the hybrid one. We may compare these waves that look like information attack operations and the information wars. They show the closeness of the processes. Here we took one of the processes connected with some information attack, cyber attack, and compared it at different levels of detailization. When the system is, when there is machine learning, undertaught and overtaught systems are not good. They take into account several components that are not needed. And we started this with Ellina, attack index, and Mexican head. This wavelet is the best for us. This is not too detailed, and it takes into account what we need in such a way. So we created attack index system. It includes network analysis and machine learning, and correlation comparisons are used. You see the logo and this snake. This is a profile of information operation. This is a small wavelet of this information operation. It is not brought to the end, but this is the central part of it. And in the system attack index that analyzes the attacks on business, on country, on the state, we may also use it, this correlation analysis, and we may use fractal analysis here as well. Why we use some surfaces here, because one is time, one is scale, whether the information is big or small, and the third space is the number that shows this process, whether it looks like information operation. So we may use it in our reports, and we may show how this process may look like. For example, one person may look at it and they cannot see it, but when we use this correlation analysis mechanism and we see this yellow mountain, we see that during this day something happened. But correlation analysis is such a thing. It is connected with probability. It provides a condition, but it's not enough. There is such an example, well known. They identified correlation between the number of those who sank in the river and the yield per year. When there is low harvest, a lot of people sank the same year. Maybe this is suicide, but this is not the case. So everyone, when there was a small harvest, it means that the weather was too hot, and more people went swimming. That's why it happened. So we should better understand the content. And you see that at the bottom of the screen you may see the red bright red and white sectors. So this is the reflection of our information space, and this scaleogram is provided to the analyst, and the analyst analyzes the day and finds the main content, the main narratives, and the system helps him to work, and he interprets the data, and sometimes this may provide better understanding for those who take decisions. So this is an attack index. It is about the system of monitoring, and this is only one component. And this is like fireworks of opportunities. Comparison, the opportunity of templates, and the opportunity to compare different processes. So this is the basis for it. And at this round table we are having 3 doctors of sciences. I believe that is why we may speak about it even in more detail, but I hope that you understood me correctly, and maybe you have some questions for me. Do you have some questions? I'm a doctor of sciences who carry out manual analysis after your system caught everything it could. It's really great because it provides a wave for the future. I had an interesting experience. We studied intelligent groups from 2013 till 2020. And when these groups stopped and something happened then in reality, some aggression of Russia increased, or some other serious things happened. And this was connected with information attacks in other areas. And anti-gender is one of the waves. When there is in information space something really serious, everything is calm, and then after this, real situations, real shellings happen. So for me, this was really important to know, and your system really contributed in 2013, 2020, and I found some documents and fake sites that were created for several days, and then they were destroyed, but information was provided, this propaganda was provided to different oblast councils, and the system preserved them. Yes, this was a small ad break, so we thank to those who made it. So why our system is important? Because it is impossible to counteract information threats if you do not have instruments that work with analysis and helps to make conclusions. And the methodology and practice, they really depend on qualification of those who use the weapons and who deal with real practical things. Now I would like to give the floor to our final speaker, and I may speak a lot about cooperation with the communications military office in 2014, and we may say that this is the person who opened my eyes concerning how the military work. And the main for us is that the information high components, they are present in the communication military service. And there was reform in accordance with NATO standards. They created cyber forces, and me, as a civilian, I believe that strategic communications, they are important. This is communication with society, and it is needed for the resilience of the country in accordance with the NATO standards. And cyber and technical component, security component is really needed. And cyber forces, do we have them? And what is going on in the sector in our country? We would like to have such hackers who may attack cyberspace of the Russian Federation, and we know that they constantly attack us, and they attack the whole Western world. I would like to give the floor to Lieutenant General in Reserve, Head of Military Communication Service of the Armed Forces in 2014-2020, Volodymyr Rapko.
Good afternoon. I would like to mention that all my slides are taken from the internet, and I would like to calm down our society that we have and assure you that we have everything that we need for the defense of this country. Some years ago, this possibility to have cyber attacks looked unbelievable, and nevertheless, since 2009, 2010, that possibility had become more possible, and we from that moment we started to develop such forces, and it was not that easy to attract and retain necessary staff. In Estonia, they have a book which describes how you may conquer a country without any military force, only via cyber waves. And this year, the president of Ukraine has set the task to create a cyber troops in Ukraine, cyber forces. And we have been building the cyber forces very actively, except perhaps for the space cyber forces, but we are thinking how to develop that. In the United States, they have a huge army, and we cannot take them as an example and a good model for us, but we can take some other European countries, and currently one of the US teams arrived to Ukraine, and now they have organized trainings for Ukrainian cyber experts. And my previous speakers explained how cyber forces in Russia develop their work. In Germany, they also have special cyber forces. In China, they have a very special department of the network systems. That is, we have a lot of models to follow, and later on I will show what I have chosen as a model for Ukrainian cyber forces. When we think about building up cyber forces, the major task is to defend this country from cyber attacks. It's quite clear that in each country you have a lot of such objects for possible cyber attacks. The more the country is developed, the more such objects in this country you may have. And here on this slide you see those potential objects which might be targeted via cyber attacks, and all these systems should act as accurately as a Swiss watch mechanism. And we have a special unit which is dealing with coordination of all the components of the cyber security system in Ukraine. When we think about warfare, we think about the legislation of Ukraine. We see that the cyber defense units should exist inside the military forces of Ukraine. But here we have problems with the legislative documents which were passed during different periods, and legislation in this area requires improvement. The only basis which exists for us in this area is to ensure a strong defense of the country against cyber attacks. And in order to do this, we need to have a very good cooperation and coordination with other armed forces of Ukraine. And why the cyber defense is so complicated? Because it is a complex thing, and cyber defense may influence many aspects. That is the military troops, for example, while cyber defense means you may ruin the movement, the communications of your enemies. You may ruin the radio and other communication means. That is the cyber defense, and cyber security is a very complicated system that should be coordinated at the very top level. The main objective of the cyber defense is to ensure that the cyber systems in this country would be able to work consistently at peace times, and in case of war should be rapidly transferred in the military regime, and that critical infrastructure is properly defended. Any vulnerable object should be properly protected against the cyber attack, should be protected from computer viruses as well as against physical interferences and physical damage to such objects as hydropower plants, nuclear power plants, etc. What else is interesting? Through cyber attacks, you may cause a lot of harm. You can make a lot of harm to your enemies. For example, air combats and air attacks, airborne attacks are very cruel and involve a lot of destruction, while cyber attack look milder, and nevertheless it may cause the disruption in the enemy's operations, which would be equal to a massive air attacks. About psychological attacks. Improper fine-tuning of the software may allow you to stolen important data, to falsify the elections, to start blackmailing. This suggests that the more important is the enterprise, the better cyber protection you should apply to it. These are examples of war actions in cyberspace. The Stuxnet operation nothing was destroyed physically, but via cyber attacks, the work of nuclear reactors was suspended for more than 3 years. Then Russian-Georgian War 2008, due to the attack on cyber networks, all the military communications were disrupted, and the military control systems were almost ruined. Now, from the anti-missile system, defense system in Syria in 2007, again, the cyber counteraction prevented Israel from bigger success using the missiles. Also, energy system of Ukraine in 2016, for almost 3 hours, the energy systems in Ukraine felt interferences and interruptions, and only after 3 hours the cyber attack was revealed and stopped. Currently, I should say that we have gained more experience, and our cyber officers are prepared, and they remain alarmed and on duty. I would like to quote one officer, German officer, who once suggested that all the agreements with the Russian Federation value the cost of paper on which they are printed, meaning that you should not trust Russia. And here you see the illustration about international documents about cybersecurity. As for the legal documents on cybersecurity, we have sufficient legal framework, but not all of them, as I already mentioned, not all of them are state-of-the-art documents. Some of them should be corrected and refreshed. What do we have in the law of enforcement and military forces? We have cyber security units, we have cyber security of banks, the special communications network, and the cyber defense department. And here on this slide, you see the structure of the cyber security forces under the commander-in-chief, under the main headquarters of the Ukrainian military forces. Here you see the major challenges to cybersecurity of Ukraine. These challenges are similar to the Estonian, Polish challenges, etc. In my discussions with my foreign colleagues, I found out that we have many similar issues. Very rapid digitalization of the country results in a situation that not all people manage to learn the new things and the proper understanding what does the cyber security mean and what does the cyber hygiene means. The cyber attack on state institutions and critical infrastructure enterprises could be equaled to the Air Force attack on the territory of the country. Then overlapping of functions and corporate fighting between the units dealing with cyber security. But the heads of all those units, centers of cyber defense, they maintain communications between each other and try to act together. The second is the dual use of all the processes and technologies in the cyber defense area that we build. That is the cyber protection of the peaceful times should be easily converted into the military cyber security at the times of war. And what we witnessed in 2014 should not happen again. Then we have some problems with outdated legislation in the cyber defense standards. That is, you should not defend the information which is actually cheap and which cannot cause a big damage to the country. We should follow the principles which are acceptable for NATO. That is, everything which is classified information according to NATO standards should be classified information in Ukraine too. I also believe that personal communication between the cybersecurity officers may strengthen the capacity of these units, and we have to teach officers how to deal with the special communication means instead of simple mobile phones or smartphones.
Because we do not have proper system of state communication, and we rent these means of communication from private operators. Of course, we have separate channels. It's difficult to carry out cyber attack on them, but they are costly and they need a lot of efforts for being efficiently used and work. Also, I would like to raise one issue concerning cyber strategy of Ukraine. I studied this document carefully. We have problems with private-public partnership. When I studied experience of Estonia, this country is rather small, and they do not have many means of counteracting, and they focused on territorial defense, including cyber territorial defense. It means that they have physical territorial defense, where they have some units and they may be deployed in forests with different weapons, and also there is a territorial defense that is gathered and that is ready to reinforce the cybersecurity department and to work for the development of cybersecurity in the country. And I believe that our forces should go along this way too, because it is costly to have a big army, but in special periods concerning mobilization of the best IT specialists, they should work for the benefit of Ukraine. This is a good cause. And now we understand that we should deal with it. It is done and it should be done. And also about for example, the tank unit or firewalls to protect some information systems of the whole armed forces. The cost is nearly the same, and what is better, we should think about it. I work with communications, and I will always speak about benefits of firewalls, and maybe specialists in tanks will speak that tanks are more important, but they say that tanks, this is the past, and bikers, they are the future. But I believe that tanks, they are really good. And the last thing I would like to say, in civilized society it is difficult to deal with the cybersecurity. Why? Talent postulates, we may see it there. If someone say that there may be cyber subversive actions, for example, in Poland, and they will send a note of protest, and this will be not correct. And Ukraine is a civilized country, and we should be really careful in our attitude to this cyber security issues, because the armed forces of Ukraine, in accordance with the law, they do not have the right to limit the rights and freedoms of people in the territory of Ukraine. And concerning some cybersecurity, maybe some computers may be seized, or internet should be disconnected, or some communications means should be disconnected, or some TV channels. And there is an influence on the freedoms of citizens. That's why this is very interesting issue. Cyber forces in NATO, they are all in the armored forces, and we took decision to form them within the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. This is an interesting issue. Maybe I do not know about some things because I am on pension for 2 years, but we believe that cyber forces, they should be within the armed forces of Ukraine. Thank you very much. Thank you. I believe that we now better understand how these forces are organized and how they will develop, and society will follow the development, and this is important for society. And I would like to finalize our event, and now I need a clicker. Now I will present my presentation. Lastly, I would like to say why this Christmas operation is important. Why this Christmas operation? The system that was mentioned today, this is like New Year decoration. This is important information about information channels. And we use Christmas and New Year because this is like a Christmas tree. And in 2018, we made some conclusions, and we spoke about, we understood that our scheme, it looks like a fairy tree. And there was an important event in the Russian Federation. Maybe I will speak about it in Russian. Maybe some citizens follow us, except specialists who should do this. The matter is, we know characteristics of the Putin's rule. This is a criminal and FSB power, and they have their cronies in the management and big oligopolies. So this is the fusion of criminals and special services specialists. It means that from one side there are the rules of criminals. They use criminal code, we may say. And in the USSR, a lot of people were in prisons. And these terms, they are now used in the high circles. Also, these are people from special services, those who were the officials in gulags. So this fusion, it brought chaos. They have well enough constitution in Russian Federation. Their laws are okay, but they are not implemented. So they are working in accordance with these unspoken rules. And in spring this year, a real hero, Belarus citizen who was in Saratov colony, and he recorded how interrogations in this colony are carried out. He heroically collected information and brought it abroad, the materials about torture, not only in Saratov colony. More than 10 colonies were the information from more than 10 colonies was gathered. And also there were some human rights defenders who helped him to flee from Russia and to publicize these documents. And the world was shocked, more than even civil society in Russian Federation, because it was cleansed so much. They do not have opportunities there, and the opportunities for them are nullified to come up with something, to speak through papers or even on Facebook, because students and teachers may be sent to prison. And society becomes more and more passive. And in 2014, at the start of the war, we've said that there is isolation and information reserve, and there was cleansing in society. This is not only about 2014, they have further plans to do this. So this person was able to get this information that is only possible in digital era. He got direct evidence how the rights are violated in the colonies of the Russian Federation. And this is really important, because this is evidence for human rights to fight criminal and special services power. And for the first time, the top criminals, they established such a system that these people who are tortured, they should not be humiliated in criminal status. So there is a split of between real authority who built the hierarchy in the prison with those officials who work in power bodies of the Russian Federation. So the digital world and lack of cybersecurity and proper protection of data helped the person to bring this evidence of torture out of the country, and part of criminal world that is in power, they try to protect those who suffered from this power. And we would like to make some steps in order to somehow motivate citizens of Russian Federation to be more active in counteracting the power, but we see that there are some unexpected results. No one believed that USSR would collapse in half a year before it really collapsed. So this split between criminal power and official power, it brought some arrests, and activists who are now sent to prison, they should know how to enter the prison cell, because they are sent to prison on charges of drugs, and we believe that the situation will change, because anti-democratic union cannot suck all the juice from the public. It should be stopped. And so we have traditions of New Year festivities, and you know that Jack Frost, it is, he has its roots in some ancient pagan traditions, including Snegurочка, a girl who accompanies him. So we have also split of traditions. Before we had Jack Frost, now we are having Saint Nicholas, and people, they now connect their family traditions not with Jack Frost but with the Santa Claus. And we do not have Snegurочка now because we do not have this tradition in the this Christian tradition. So Jack Frost, he was liked by the Soviet people, but we believe that we should use tradition of Saint Nicholas, who flies in his sleigh, and we believe that we should adhere to the new tradition, and we believe that in the next year we will have more capability to fight in these hybrid wars. Thank you.